everybody? Welcome back into the channel. Today we have another deck list for you guys. This is the red yellow Cad Bane deck that went 3-0 at this week's locals. I just wanted to go over it. Shout outs to Ryan, ran it really well. What's really strong about this deck is that it's actually like pretty solid against aggro, which can be a problem for some decks, right? Also, Han struggles with this a little bit if you don't want to play like honest through Han, right? You can cheat out the units and take damage on them, and this will just go ahead and start pinging out stuff left and right. This is kind of slowed down, I guess, if you are playing blue against this, right? And then it just goes ahead and uses the removal, right? The blue removal can be a problem for this deck, but overall it's a pretty fun deck. We're gonna do this deck list video in particular a little bit different than normal. We're just gonna have the deck list right on the screen here, and then I'm just gonna kind of talk about important cards, and they're just going to come up right above me here as we kind of talk about them. Nothing too crazy. And again, I just want to quickly go over this deck so you guys aren't sitting here through like a half an hour long deck list video. I'm going to quickly talk about this deck, and it is really solid. So first off, we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about Cad Bane. That's going to be coming up in the middle of the screen here. But Cad Bane, when you play an underworld unit, you may exhaust this leader, and then if you do, an opponent chooses the unit to deal 1 damage to it, and this is where the pinging starts. You can get some really good combos on turn 1 where you can get a lot of damage in on the base and in on a unit, right? So you can go ahead and let's just say you play Lady Proxima, right? Lady Proxima then goes ahead and triggers Cad Bane. If you go second, this deck kind of wants to go second right off the bat, right? So you ping one of their units for 1. You go ahead and play Lady Proxima, and then you can go ahead and hop in with McClunky and pop up Lady Proxima, take out the thing on the board. It can get really crazy really quick for your opponent to kind of handle with all the pinging and stuff like that. And then, obviously, if you control 6 or more resources, you can go ahead and bring this bad boy out. It has raid 2. It is a 2/8, so it is kind of hard and difficult to take off the board. Now, this is where the blue comes in clutch against this deck, because you can go ahead and you can just use Rival's Fall, get rid of Cad Bane right away, and then the big part of the deck might not go as well as planned for the Cad Bane player, but again, you're still pinging a lot of stuff, you're still spreading the damage without even having to attack, allowing you to kind of trade in using your ambush units. And as you see, we have a ton of ambush units in this deck. But overall, when Cad Bane comes out and you play an underworld card, you go ahead, your opponent has to ping something for 2 damage, and that's where things again start to spiral, start to snowball. On top of that, we are playing Tarkin Town. Now, it has to be a damage unit that you use Tarkin Town on, but as long as it's a non-leader damage unit, you can go ahead and just deal 3 damage right away. And again, I talked about Han earlier. This is another thing that lets and makes your opponent who's playing Han have to think twice about cheating out these units, right? Because they just up Tarkin Town, get rid of that unit. It doesn't really matter if you got it out early, it's just dead. So Tarkin Town is a threat against a good amount of decks. Also, you know, you can go ahead and ping something first turn and then just Tarkin Town it, and your opponent's a leg back, and then it allows you to go ahead and maybe Lady Proxima and Greedo on the first turn, and then you have a 3/1 unit on the board. You have pinged their base for 1. You get rid of their unit on the board, and then they're just really far behind right away, and they have to kind of figure out how to go about that. But that's just like, this deck has really good start pieces to kind of get you off on the right foot through pinging and through other abilities throughout the deck, right? So let's go ahead and start talking about the 1 cost, right? The 1 cost we have Greedo, and Greedo, again, we all know what he does. He is a 1-drop 3/1, and then when it's defeated, you can reveal the top card of your deck, you discard it, and if it's a non-unit, you get to deal 2 damage to a ground unit. It has to be a ground unit, but still, that's another way that this deck has to kind of remove things from the board. So through pinging and this, you can remove something that's potentially a 3/3, maybe Battlefield Marine and stuff like that. And I just feel like Greedo, obviously, in this deck is really good, right? McClunky, one of the best events in this set. It is a 1-drop. You bring back an underworld card to your hand. You deal 3 damage to a unit. Again, this plus Greedo is really strong because you can go ahead and play it and then just drop Greedo right down on the board because it is cheap enough. And again, you're blasting stuff for something for 3. Cad Bane's ability, you're pinging. That's potentially going to go ahead and finish off something that can potentially be a threat on your opponent's side. It's just a really good card in this deck because there's a ton of underworld cards in the deck, right? Next up, we have Lady Proxima, one of my favorite ways to start a turn 1 in this deck, right? Lady Proxima, whenever you play an Underworld unit, the opponent takes 1 damage to their base, and that can like stockpile in this deck, right? Because you can play multiple Underworld units in a turn, and you can just quickly just keep pinging the base. It's a really big threat. If sometimes, and more often than not, your opponent's gonna maybe leave Lady Proxima on the board if they're trying to go fast, right, and they're trying to hit your base as quickly as possible, trying to outpace your damage. There's a chance that they might leave Lady Proxima on the board, and if that's the case, the longer the game goes, the more of a threat that this becomes, and then your opponent's gonna have to kind of deal with it from there. But still, Lady Proxima, even though it has no attack, it's just a really strong card. Next, we have Crafty Smuggler. We all know it's a 2-drop 2/2. Now we're getting into the 2-drop units and 2-drop cards, but Crafty Smuggler comes in shielded. It's a 2/2. It's really good at trading in, especially in this deck. Again, all that pinging. It all comes back to pinging with Cad Bane, because these units, especially Crafty Smuggler, has a shield, so it's going to stay on the board, swing into something, it's potentially going to have a damage on it already, makes it for easier trades, right? Sneak Attack. Now, Sneak Attack is pretty good because you can Sneak Attack in maybe Zuckuss early and then get Forlam. You can get that combo in right away. Yes, whatever you are sneak attacking in will die in the next regroup phase, but still, it's just a really cheap way to get out potentially like a big hard-hitting card, right? And you can also use it with Dr. Evison because it will die, and then they're not going to be able to get the effect with Dr. Everson because it will be dead while all their resources are getting untapped anyway, right? So that's pretty good right there. Zine is a pain to deal with. It's basically a Sparkle Rebellion, right? On play, you go ahead and you look at your opponent's hand and you discard one of the cards from there. The only caveat is that they do get to draw a card to replace it, so they can potentially draw into what you discarded or draw into something maybe better, but still it's a good way to get hand knowledge as well. And you can also play this for Smuggle, which is very good because you can always put it down as a resource and not feel as bad about it if you need to maybe smuggle it out and kind of make sure that your opponent's not using a Super Laser Blast or a Rival's Fall when you're bringing out Cad Bane. There's just a lot of things that you can kind of prepare for with this card, right? I talked about it before with Sneak Attack with Dr. Everson. It comes in shielded. It does have a bounty. It lets your opponent ready 6 resources after it's defeated. But again, you can use it with Sneak Attack, get in a cheeky 3 damage. It dies. It doesn't really matter when it dies because they're just going to ready up the resources that they were already going to ready up. And then also, if you play it right, you don't really have to worry about the bounty as long as you're playing smart with Dr. Everson, right? Next up, we had Cloud Rider. It is an ambushing 3/1. It's pretty good. It's just a 2-drop 3/1 with ambush. And as you see in this deck, there's a ton of ambush, and it's a good way. Again, this deck wants to kind of ping things, keep the board under control, and then use its bigger units to swing into the base, like Cad Bane with Raid 2, Zuckuss, and things like that. And then also using pings from things like Lady Proxima and other things along the board. Next, we have Jetpack. Now, Jetpack can also be used with Smuggle, but when played, you give a shield to a shield token to an attached unit at the start of the regroup phase. It does go away, but it's a good way to, again, use that shield token to potentially trade into something on that turn. And then also they're getting +2, +0, so they are stronger with it as well. Jetpack, pretty solid choice right there. Next, Surprise Strike. We all know what it does on play. Like when you play it, just attack with a unit. It gets +3, +0. It's a good way to chunk the base, right? A lot of the things in this deck are swinging for 3 damage, right? 3 or more damage. And then basically you're swinging for 6. It's just really strong. And again, it can finish off games. It can get you like just some burst damage at random points. It's just really solid. Also, it can help you swing over threatening things as well. Surprise Strike often does go into yellow decks for sure. Now we're getting into our 3-drop units here. We have Boba Fett. Boba Fett, as we know, is a really, really good card on attack if that unit is exhausted from attacking, or as long as it's not played that turn, right? If it doesn't have that summoning sickness, right? You can go ahead and you deal 3 before you take damage. So essentially, if they have already attacked or you have exhausted that unit, it'll deal 6 damage total. And if they have 3 or less remaining HP, it'll deal that 3 damage first, and Boba Fett will stay on the board. Again, another good way of keeping Boba Fett and other units on the board while also taking care of your opponent's units and getting them off the board. Again, it works really well with the pinging ability of Cad Bane because it's going to lower your opponent's units with bigger amounts of HP to make it so you can swing in with Boba Fett and just kind of go from there, right? Next up, we have Punishing One. When an upgraded enemy is defeated, you get to re-ready this unit. And, you know, there are a lot of decks that run upgrades, right? So it's just a good way to, you know, use this to get out massive damage. There are decks that get experience tokens, and that does count. So there was a turn where I had Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan ended up dying. I gave experience tokens to another unit. They ended up killing that unit after swinging in with Punishing One into the base. And because they defeated the unit with the upgrades, the experience tokens, he got to re-ready Punishing One and dealt another 3 damage to my base. There's ways that you can go over, even if you're not playing bounties or anything like that, your opponents, even with just experience tokens. Shield tokens aren't going to really matter in this deck because, again, you can't really defeat the things with shield tokens because the only way of defeating it is dealing damage in this deck, so that's not going to work, right? But you have things like Sabine with Darksaber, you have just upgrades in general Mandalorian decks and stuff like that. Just any type of upgrade and experience tokens do count, so that can become a problem to deal with right then and there. Next, we're going to talk about Relentless Pursuit. Relentless Pursuit allows you to use a unit, and it captures a non-leader enemy unit that has the cost that equals the same or less than that unit, right? So if you have Boba Fett, you can go ahead and capture something that costs 3 or less, right? And if it's a bounty hunter, it gains a shield. And again, shields in this deck allow you to get favorable trades and stuff like that. And it's just a good way to keep your units on the board, but also capturing something and then putting a shield on it, as long as, again, this deck does kind of suffer against the blue matchup, the blue villainy in particular, because they are just able to just use their events to kind of kill things and get their stuff back, right? But Relentless Pursuit is super good, slowing down your opponent, capturing it, and giving your bounty hunters a shield, right? So you're talking about Greedo, you're talking about Forlom, Zuckuss, and Boba Fett, so it can become a problem for sure. Next up, we have Black Sun Starfighter. It's a Sentinel in space. It's a 3/2, which is a good way to protect yourself in space. Getting to probably my favorite part of the deck, right? The Forlom Zuckuss combo, right? While you have Forlom, right? It's an ambush unit, and while it's on the board, if you have the Zuckasses you play have ambush and +1/+1. And then going over to Zuckuss, when Zuckuss has Saboteur, and while Zuckuss is on the board, your Forloms have Saboteur and +1/+1. So this came in clutch for this deck because I had a Sentinel on the board, right? And Zuckuss was on the board, and they were able to ambush out Forlom, and it had Sentinel, and then it was able to absolutely decimate one of my units, even around the Sentinel. So it's just a really good way to kind of get around things like that. And again, choosing your units that you want to defeat when you play these units. And again, with Zuckuss on the board, it is a 5/5 when Forlom comes out and ambushes, right? Forlom on the board, then at that point, then Zuckuss goes ahead and swings into the potential Sentinel or the base because it has Saboteur for 7/7, for 7 total damage. It's really strong. Plus, they're just cool characters, in my opinion. So, a lot of fun. We have Ruthless Raider next. Another way to ping your opponent's base and units. It's just gonna, again, keep on pinging. You ping, right? You're gonna deal 2 damage to a base and a unit, and then when it dies, so it's on play, and when it's defeated, ping. And again, you're just pinging all over the place. So it's just the trend here, right? So we have Memphis Nest, Marauder. It has ambush, and when a friendly unit is ambushing in, it gives the defending unit -3 attack. This could potentially make it so you can use Cloud Rider and swing in something and potentially have it live if it only has 3 attack. Again, you're bringing out Forlom. When you bring out Forlom, you can also do it with Zuckuss when Forlom's on the board. All these ambush units now have protection when Memphis Nest is on the board. And the final card of the deck, we have Fennec Shan. It's another ambush unit, works well with Memphis Nest. And then also on attack, deal 1 damage to the defender for each different cost in the discard pile. So you could potentially deal out a ton of damage before you even take anything back. And again, this is a favorable way to trade into your opponent's units and keep your units on the board. So there are many different ways for you to go ahead, take out your opponent's units, and still have yours remaining on the board. Whether it be with the ambushing with Memphis Nest, giving it -3, -0. This deals damage before it has to potentially deal damage itself. Boba Fett, again, exhausted unit, boom, deals 3 before it has to take damage if it's able to take out that unit. Shielded units, good way to give shields in this deck. This deck is a ton of fun. It's a good, again, really solid against aggro decks. So if you're having trouble against aggro decks, this might be the deck for you. And going into the sideboard, before we end the video here, the sideboard is actually a lot of fun. It has a lot of card hate, right? You have 2 Hotshot Blasters. Hotshot Blasters are great in this deck. You can play it for 1 on a unit just if you need a little bit of damage to end the game. But also, you can play it for Smuggle for 3 for the Cunning cost, and then you get to attack with a unit, and then it gets +2, and it allows you to attack for 3. It's just a really sneaky way of potentially finishing off the game, right? You have another Bazine, just to, if you need to go ahead, if you're playing against that blue deck and you need to get rid of these kill events and stuff like that, go ahead and play the second Bazine in your deck. You have Gamorrean Guards. If the aggro matchup is a problem a little bit, you can go ahead, if you need a little bit more protection, go ahead and play the Gamorrean Guards. Every unit in this deck, for the most part, is a yellow unit, so you will get Sentinel more often than not. Again, talking about that card hate, you have Pillage and Forced Surrender. Again, if you're playing against those blue decks, those pesky events, Power of the Dark Side, Takedown, Rivals Fall, Fell the Dragon, all those, Vanquish, Stupid Laser Blast, Vigilance, because that's also annoying, right? You're going to go ahead, you're going to play this, and you're going to try to discard some cards. And then also, like, against aggro, when their hands are pretty small, just dropping this down to make so their hands are 0, that's a good way to kind of kill out a Sabine deck or a Han Solo deck, for that matter, as well. And Forced Surrender as well is a good way to have your opponent discard. And then you have Bounty Hunter's Crew, and Bounty Hunter's Crew allows you to get an event from the discard pile, and, you know, you can go ahead and grab McClunky. It's a really good way to go ahead and just deal damage, 3 damage or something. Relentless Pursuit, if you have to capture something, you can go ahead and play Sneak Attack if you want to go ahead and sneak attack out some like big boys in the late game. It's just really good. Now, this deck is a ton of fun. I highly recommend you guys try it out. The link to the deck list will be down in the description down below. Try it out. Again, if you are struggling against maybe Sabine or decks like that, try this deck out. It's not going to win 100% of the time. I'm not trying to say that, right? But it does give you a pretty good chance to, you know, compete against it, right? All the pinging with the smaller units on the board make it so you can kind of control their board pretty early, and then while still keeping your board intact and kind of going wide on them. And then you can go ahead and deal out big damage with Zuckuss. Because, like, listen, Zuckuss for 5 as a 6/6, really strong, especially if you pair it up with Forlome, right? And then you have threats like Lady Proxima, again, pinging the bases for a ton of damage. It becomes a problem. And then you can go ahead, Cad Bane, for, again, control. And Tarkin Town, more control, and just, again, trying to keep your units on your opponent's side at a small number. But I hope you guys liked this deck list. Shout out to Ryan for running it at this week's locals. And again, if you want to check it out down in the description below, definitely go ahead and do that. Let me know how you guys like the deck list. We do have some matchup videos coming for you guys in a little bit. Also going to be going over some of the new cards. We're going to be, this is probably going to be the only deck list video that's like this. I'll go back to my other format in the following weeks. I just have a final exam and my birthday coming up, so it's been really hectic over here on this side. But we're going to go back to the old way the deck lists are after this week, probably next week. So hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys are new here, hit that sub button. Support is always appreciated, and I'll see you guys in the next video.